Good afternoon. For today's afternoon session on deep learning applications in NLP, we have with us Mr. Ritesh Srinivasan, research scientist, Philips India Limited. Mr. Ritesh Srinivasan completed his BE in computer science from NMA MIT NITTE and MTech in computer science from University of Mysore. He is a pragmatic researcher with over 15 years of experience in applied research in the areas of machine learning, natural language processing, and of late into deep learning. He has one US granted patent, 20 patent filings, and 3 publications. It's a great honor for us to have you with us today, sir. On behalf of the management of St. Joseph Engineering College and the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at SJEC, I extend a warm and hearty welcome to you. Before we proceed with the afternoon session, I would want the participants to keep this in mind. You're requested to mute yourself during the session. We request all the participants to ask questions only towards the end of the sessions. This is to inform you that the session will be recorded. Without further delay, I now call upon Mr. Ritesh Srinivasan to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for the kind introduction. Let me share the screen now. I hope you can see my screen. Can one of you please confirm if you can see the screen?
No, sir. No. We are not able to see your screen, sir.
Okay. I think now you can see it.
Yes, sir. Now it is visible, sir.
Okay. So let's go to the agenda. So I'll be talking about what are word vectors, right? Then I'll be talking about two types of artificial neural networks. One is a recurrent neural network, RNN, and then there is LSTM. Then I'll talk about neural machine translation. Then I'll talk about transformer, which is a deep learning model which is being used widely recently. Then I'll talk about an application question answering, and then I'll talk about named entity recognition. Okay, so I will also try to show a demo for named entity recognition if time permits. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so I believe you are familiar with deep learning. Most of the participants are familiar with deep learning because you already had sessions on deep learning, right? So what is the difference between classical natural language processing and deep learning based natural language processing? I believe you are also aware of what is natural language processing because there were some sessions on that as well. In general, what we do in natural language processing is you have a set of documents, which is basically text. Then you do a language detection, or sometimes you assume that the documents are in English. And then you have a set of pre-processing steps which you do, which is tokenization, which is splitting the words. Then you do part of speech tagging. Then you do stop word removal and a certain set of pre-processing. And then you build a machine learning model out of it for a set of tasks. Like task could be sentiment detection, classification, text classification. It could be entity extraction. It could be translation or topic modeling. So this is the classical NLP pipeline, where you have the pre-processing steps and then you have the modeling steps, or building a machine learning model. Now, what happens in deep learning is that you have these documents, which are again text files, which have text. You might do some pre-processing. Sometimes you will not do pre-processing, but at least you will do some kind of splitting of words or tokenization. And then you will feed into something called as an embedding layer. And then you have a set of hidden layers of a artificial neural network. And then you have output units for these tasks. So what has deep learning done is that it has completely replaced this pre-processing and modeling pipeline over here. So you as a developer or as a researcher or somebody who's experimenting with machine learning algorithms need not write any code or methods for pre-processing the text. All this, what is an important feature, everything is done internally by the deep learning neural network. Okay, so that is a key difference between the classical NLP pipeline and deep learning based NLP pipeline. Now let us look at what is a motivation for word to vec. When I'm saying word to vec, it is word to vectors. Okay, so the motivation comes from if you look at audio signals or if you look at images, the data is actually very dense over here. For example, if you look at image pixels, you have dense pixels, you have dense in audio also, you have dense signals. But when it comes to text, okay, the way in which text is represented for any processing, for any machine learning algorithm is a sparse representation, right? So if you look at how text is generally represented for use in machine learning algorithms is you have something called as bag of words. Basically, if there is a sentence, you will consider each of the word as a feature. So that is why it is known as bag of words. Then you have some feature extraction method called as term frequency or inverse document frequency, which tells how important this word is for the particular sentence. Also, how important is this word in the whole corpus of lot of text files, right? So one way of representing words is called as one-hot encoding. Okay. For example, if you have a vocabulary of 4 words, basically you have 4 words. So for the second word, the vector would look like 0, 1, 0, 0. Okay. Now, generally, if you for any text processing, the number of words will be huge. They will be anywhere between 20,000 to 50,000 or even more, right? Then representing every word using this 20 to 50,000 K vector would be, one is that it will be very sparse. Again, if you have one document like that, if you have 5 words and if you have 50,000 words in the vocabulary, and to represent them, each word, if you are representing by these 50K dimensions, you can think for one sentence of 5 words, you have close to 250K, data points. So it is really sparse. And another thing is that even though the words may be very similar, for example, if you take this word called hotel and a word called motel, their vector representations are very different over here, right? And to overcome this, people thought that how do you efficiently represent words? That is where this neural word embeddings came, which is word vectors, where we are trying to represent words in a vector space. And this vector space could be of, again, 200 to 400 dimensions. For example, this is a word vector which I have created. Okay, for example, if you have a word called hotel and motel over here, the vectors may be very similar to each other because they are in the same semantic space. Both mean the same thing. So the vector should be very close. So this is the basic intuition behind word to vec. Now let us look at what kind of neural networks are used to actually get this word embeddings. Okay. So there are 2 kinds of neural networks which are used for getting this word embeddings. One is called as context bag of words. The other one is called as skip-n-gram. So if you look at a context bag of words, the idea over here is that you have a context of words. Okay, for example, you have the first word, the second word, you have the fourth word, and you have the fifth word. Now you are trying to predict what should be the word which is present in the middle over here. Okay, so you create this neural network. Now, when you create this neural network, after creation of this neural network, you train this neural network very well. And after training of this neural network, if you just take this projection layer, okay, that is your word embedding for this particular word. Because that projection layer weights actually represent some good features of this word in a particular vector space. So that is the idea. So this is your context bag of words. Then you have this skip-n-gram. Okay. In skip-n-gram, what you do is that you give a word as an input to a network, a simple neural network, and then you try to predict what are all the neighboring words which can occur with this word in this particular corpus. Now, for the people who don't know what is a corpus is nothing but a collection of documents. Okay. So if you have a set of, say you want to build word embeddings using some literature, okay, you have a set of English books, then the collection of text present across all these books will form a corpus. So here what is done is that in the skip-n-gram, you are given a word and then you are trying to predict what are all its neighboring words in the corpus. So both have their advantages and disadvantages. So in literature, what they say is that the context bag of words works very well for frequently occurring words, but then if the words are rare, it kind of misses out in getting very good embeddings. Whereas the skip n-gram is good at handling rare words also. So let us look into some more details of skip n-gram with an example. Okay. So this is a statement over here. You have a sentence basically. The sentence is the standard sentence which is widely used in NLP. So you have this sentence: the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Okay. So now if you go according to the skip n-gram, what you do is that if your word is the, okay, you are now trying to predict that the word quick and brown appears close to the word the in the corpus, or they will appear along with the word the. So a training sample here becomes the word the as the input, and the output which needs to be predicted is either quick or brown, right? With the assumption that we are taking a window of 2 over here, 2 words. Okay. Now let us take the next example. So here now we take the word quick. Okay. So what are all the words which can appear with the word quick? You have the word the, you have the word brown, you have the word fox. Okay. Similarly, if you go down over here, when you take the word brown, you are trying to predict that the words which can occur with the word brown is the, quick, fox, jumps. Similarly over here. So this is how you are trying to now take a word as an input, and you are now trying to predict the neighboring words which occur together with this word. Okay, using a skip-gram neural network. Now let us look at how does the skip-gram neural network look like. My assumption is that everybody is familiar a little bit with neural network. So over here, what you do is that, assuming that your dictionary has close to 10,000 unique words. So basically, your text corpus has 10,000 unique words. So now every word can be represented using an one hot vector like this. So the word is a position 1. The word vector in the word vector in the one hot vector, it will be 1, which is equal to the index of the word. For example, if you have 10,000 word and the word ant appears somewhere in the 100, as if you sort it alphabetically, and the word ants is say somewhere like 10 or maybe 20 or even 100, right? So in that case, in this particular vector, in the index equal to 10 or 20 or 100, it will be 1, and all the other values will be 0. So this is called as one hot encoding. Now you give this as an input to a hidden layer of neurons. Okay. So in this case, we consider 300 neurons. So why this 300? I will come to it later. So there are 300 neurons over here. So you feed this one as an input to this 300 neurons. Again, in the output layer, how many neurons are possible? Because your dictionary has 10,000 words, you can have 10,000 neurons possible, because this ants, in the neighborhood of the word ants, you can get so many other words, right? So you can have 10,000 neurons over here. And this is a fully connected neural network from this hidden layer to the output layer. Okay. So here, if you see that one of the output layer neurons is for the word ability. One of the output neuron is for the word able. And if you see, the last word is zone. So this is again based on the dictionary. If it is 10,000 is number of words in your dictionary, then this is 10,000 neurons. Similarly, the one hot input vector will be also 10,000 positions. If you have close to 50,000 words in your dictionary, then this one hot vector will be 50,000 positions, and this output layer also will be 50,000 neurons. Okay. So now, if you look at this particular representation, it looks like this. Okay. So you have 10,000 words and you have 300 neurons, right? So for every word you can think of it as a matrix over here, which the matrix size is 10,000 into 300. Okay. Then again, from the input layer is the hidden layer is what? You have 300 neurons. From these 300 neurons, you are trying to again map it to 10,000 words. So again, you have 300 into 10,000. So this input or hidden layer is what will become your word embedding. Okay. So now let us look at how you can compute this. So for example, you have this word vector for ants. Okay. So here, if you see, it is 300 features. Do you know why this is 300 features? So what happens is that you have this 10,000, 1 into 10,000 is your input representation. And then you have this 300 neurons. So and it's again a fully connected neural network. So when it multiplies with this, what happens is that because all the other vectors in our one hot encoding is 0 and it is only 1 for AND, you get 1 into 300 or 300 features over here. So this is your word vector. Now, again, what you do is that you get these 300 features and then you are feeding it into the output layer, right? So in the output layer, again, you have this 300 features, which are again fed to, you have this 10,000 words. Now in the output layer, what you do is that you do something called as a softmax activation. Now, what is softmax activation? So if you look at this particular network, say go back to this network, softmax activation is nothing but you take all these weight values, basically the output, the summation of this vector values over here, which is 1, and then you take these weight values, you sum it up, and then you do what you call, you raise it to the power of exponent. So e power x. So if you get the summation of all these vectors over here, you raise it to exponent. So e raise it to this summation. And then you divide it by summation of all these exponent values which come from each of these output neurons. So that is called as softmax activation. That is what is done over here. Basically, the result is nothing but it is a probability that if you randomly pick a word nearby ants, the word is car. Okay, so it gives a probability of this thing. So higher probability values over here means that the word ants and the word car occurs together in our documents. Okay, so then this becomes your word vector for this word ants in the vector space. Okay, so this is how you do it. Now, what are the issues with this skipgram training? So as I said, we had word vectors with close to 300 components, right? And the vocabulary was 10,000 words. Okay, you needed 2 weight matrices because you had a hidden layer and an output layer. Okay, both these layers would have a weight matrix of how much million weights. Because you have the hidden layer is 300 neurons, your input is 10,000 vectors. So 10,000 into 300, okay, which is equal to 3 million. And similarly, from the hidden layer to the output layer is again 300 into 10,000, which is another 3 million. So you have 6 million weights to be trained. Okay. And how do you train neural networks? You do gradient descent. So if the network is that large, gradient descent is definitely going to be very slow. And to make matters worse, you also need a huge amount of training data in order to tune so many weights because you need to avoid overfitting, right? So if you have millions of weight times billions of training samples, means it's a really huge model, right? To train, you require a lot of hardware to do this. So to overcome this part, the authors of Word2Vec actually came out with 2 techniques. Okay, one is called as a sampling rate. So the basic idea is that if you have a large corpus, the most frequent words can occur hundreds of millions of times. For example, in the words like in, the, and a. And usually these words don't provide any information. They have less information values, say, compared to the rare words. Okay. For example, if you are trying to create a skipgram model, the benefits of observing the co-occurrence of France and Paris, or say India and New Delhi, is much more useful information than saying the relation between France and the. Because say the relation between France and the will occur frequently because the word the occurs very frequently in this thing. It doesn't really convey any meaning. For example, similarly, if you take India and the, it wouldn't mean much importance for any of our language models. But if it is India and New Delhi, it is much more important for us, right? So basically the idea is that the vector representation of frequent words do not change significantly after training on several million samples. So we don't need to actually really consider the frequent words. So for this, what they did was they came up with a sampling frequency. Okay. So to counter the imbalance between the rare and frequent words, they used a simple subsampling approach. So each word is in the training set is discarded by using this probability formula. This formula is very simple. So for a word wi, you are taking 1 minus square root of t is a threshold divided by frequency of w of word A. So if a word is very frequently occurring in the text corpus, then this probability will be less. So basically, we kind of reject that word. That is the idea. Okay, so this is the sampling rate. Next, you have this technique called as negative sampling. Okay, so the negative sampling idea is very simple. So as I said, we had this one hot vector, right? So we wanted after the word quick, we need to predict whether the word brown appears. But what used to happen in our this thing, we had this 10,000 into 1, and then on this side also you had 300 into 10,000. But instead of predicting probability for what is the next word after quick for those 10,000 words, you take one word in the corpus which appears very frequently with quick, which is your brown, or some other word which appears frequently, and then you select a set of random words which have no relation with the word quick or brown, which don't appear together with this word. So these are called as negative samples. Okay. Now you will ask the question that why negative samples? Why don't we just use the word brown? Then your network gets reduced because it will be like, okay, it will be just one sample over here. So it will become 1 into 300 weights over here and 10,000 into 300 over here. But then the disadvantage becomes that it can get overfitted to that word, or it is just a binary this thing over here. That is why you also introduce some random negative words over here. So this technique is called as negative sampling. Okay. Now, how do you again select the negative samples? It is based on something called as uniform distribution, where more frequent words are more likely to be selected as negative samples. Okay. So the formula for this is that what is the probability of a word WI based on its frequency? So it is the frequency of that word, how much time it appears in the corpus, divided by the sum of frequencies of all words present in the corpus. Okay, so that is the probability. Now, what they realized in the paper is that if you, take it to the power of 3 by 4, similarly in the summation also, then this gives good results. So that is the idea over here. Okay, so this is negative sampling. Now, for word2vec, for training a small neural network for word2vec, there are two hyperparameters. One is the number of negative samples. So the original paper for word2vectors said that a number between 5 to 20 is a good number for negative samples. If you have a huge corpus or a huge data set, then any number between 2 and 5 is good enough for the negative samples. Okay. Similarly, for the window size. Okay. So the smaller window size lead to embeddings where high similarity scores between two embeddings indicate that the words are interchangeable. So if you have a larger window size, then the embeddings are where similarity is more indicative of relatedness of the words. So if you have small window sizes for training, so basically you take a sentence of 2 to 15 length, or you combine sentences and you get this length, and you use it for training word2vec by passing every word and then trying to find neighboring words. Then here you get high similarity scores for words which could be interchanged, means they are the meaning is similar or this thing. But if you go into a larger window size, then the words are more related to each other. So that is the parameters. Okay. Now you would be imagining like what is the use of word2vectors. Okay. I said you have a word, and you can train it using you can train the words in a particular corpus. You can train it using the skip-gram model, and you can get an embedding which is nothing but a vector representation for the word, right? So when they did this word2vector, they found out some very interesting properties. Okay, they found out that the vector of man and woman are quite related together in the same way as uncle and aunt, king and queen. So from this, what can you infer? You can infer that the vectors are nicely representing the gender in the vector space. Okay. So if you do some operations of man minus woman, you get some value of the vectors. That value is similar to uncle minus aunt vector or king minus queen vector. Okay. So this is an interesting property of word2vector. So they could find these relations. Similarly, you take this example, king is to queen as kings is to queens, right? So this is like the plural form. So it is able to capture this relation also nicely, right? Another interesting property was that it was also able to capture vector composition. So, for example, if you take the vector king, okay, the word vector for king, you subtract the word vector of man, okay, to this vector, you add the word vector of woman, you would find that you will get a vector very similar to queen. So it is nicely capturing this relationship between words. So this was a really nice breakthrough in NLP, because earlier what used to happen in NLP is that you used to express words using, a frequentist approach, basically how much time this word occurs, which is your TF, IDF kind of feature representation. But now you have vector representations which are able to semantically, represent the words. Now the advantage of this is, like, if you have, say, two sentences, now you want to find out if these two sentences are similar. What you will do is that for every word in the sentence, you will create a word vector, right? So now you have a word representation vectors for sentence 1, you have a word representation vector for sentence 2. You will do a simple cosine similarity measure, which is nothing but a dot product of these vectors. And if the cosine similarity measure value is high, then you say that these two sentences are quite similar. So word2vec is used as a feature extraction in our NLP processing. Okay. So now this was a question which came up during my last presentation also, that are there word embeddings for Indian languages? Okay, because if you are interested in doing languages research on or NLP on Indian languages, this is a recent paper which came as early as May 2020 this year, whereby this particular group from IIT Bombay have actually created word embeddings for many Indian languages. Okay, so they have created word embeddings for Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Konkani, Malayalam, Marathi, basically 14 Indian languages. Okay, and they say that these word embeddings are, having better performance than some other word embeddings which are also present. Like there is this NLP package called FastText AI. So this FastText AI also has some embeddings for Indian languages. Okay. So with this, this covers about word embeddings. I have not covered any code over here for word embeddings. You can easily look up for tutorials on word embeddings, but the intuition and idea behind word embeddings, I have tried to cover it. Okay. I would like to have a small questionnaire session over here, just to get a feeling from the audience of how like they have understood certain things, right? So I'll ask a question. You can just type out the responses. Okay. And then we'll move to the next topic, because I know this is the afternoon session and I might put you to deep sleep. So it's better that I have some kind of interactivity instead of having the interactivity in the end. Okay. So my first question to the audience is that what do you think is the motivation for word vectors? Can you please reply in the chat? Anybody? I hope you can hear me. If it is a wrong answer, it is fine, but at least somebody can attempt. Or maybe you can unmute yourself and yes, finding similarity between words is one of the possibilities of word2vectors. But we can easily use in neural networks. Yes, that is also one of the possibilities. Numerical representation of words. Yes. So somebody's asked me to repeat the question. So the question is that what is the motivation for creating word vectors? Okay. So I see some responses. So yes, the idea is that if you represent word vectors using something called as one-hot vectors, similar words may have different vectors and they don't really capture the semantics. So you want to capture the semantics of the word. That is why we have this word vector concept, right? So it was nicely able to represent this thing. Now the next question is that, do you think the network which we used for getting word vectors, is it an example of a deep neural network, or it is your normal artificial neural network? Is it really deep learning or it is not deep learning? That's my question. Do you think it's really a deep learning neural network or it is not? Even though I am talking it in a deep learning session. Yes. Yes. Many people are saying it is artificial neural network. Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. It is not really a deep learning neural network, because you generally consider a network as a deep learning neural network if you have multiple hidden layers, right? In your word-to-vec neural network, you just have one hidden layer. So anything more than one hidden layers or more than two hidden layers is generally considered as a deep learning neural network. So this is actually a shallow network. Okay. So now let's go to the next part of the topic. Okay. So in word2vec, what are the newer developments? So the newer developments are, you have something called as the transformer, which I'll be explaining. Then you have something called as BERT, which also I'll be explaining. Then you have OpenAI transformer. You have something called as Elmo. So these are all the newer developments of in the word2vec space. I will be explaining about transformer and BERT as well. Now let us look at what are the kinds of neural network which are useful in your deep learning for NLP. Okay. So one of the neural network which is very useful for deep learning in NLP is something called as a recurrent neural network. Okay. So why did the recurrent neural network come into existence, or why is it useful for NLP? Okay. So you should realize one thing, that in NLP, it is a task. In NLP, there are tasks where say the words in the sentences are related to each other, and you have to read the entire word to make out a meaning of the sentence, or you have to read the entire paragraph to make a meaning out of the paragraph for a certain task. Suppose you want to classify that paragraph. Suppose you want to classify a news article, right? So you need to do a lot of reading on the news article to actually, understand what this news article talks about. For a human, it is easy. You look at a couple of sentences and you will say that this is sports, this is politics. Okay. So that is where you have some kind of a temporal relation between the words. There is a time relation between the words. So that is where this neural network came, because in your normal artificial neural network, you are not able to actually capture the relationship between words. Okay. Because what will happen is that in your normal neural network, you will pass one word at a time as input and you get an output. Okay, whether this word belongs to some category in the grammar or it contributes to some output. But if you have an entire sentence and you want to give it to the neural network as an input, you have to either concatenate all the vectors of the sentence and then give it as an input, but you cannot capture the time relations. That is where this recurrent neural network came. Recurrent neural network is very simple. You have a artificial neural net or a neuron over here, which takes an input, which gives an output. Okay. But it also passes this output to itself. Okay. So this thing is called as an hidden state. So this is the representation for a unrolled recurrent neural network. Okay. It takes as an input at an instance of time t. That is why you see this xt, and it gives an output ht for that time instance t, and there is this loop, okay, to itself, which kind of maintains an inner state. So the idea is that if you have a set of sentences over here, you pass the first word, it gives an output, it also gets an state. Okay, now you pass the second word. By this time, this neuron has actually seen the previous word, right, which is represented by this thing. So it has seen the previous word, it is now seeing the current word, and then it is giving a output, right? So in this case, it is actually seen the previous two words, it is seeing the current word, and then it is giving an output. So this recurrent neural network is very good for modeling time series data. So basically, you can consider your text as a time series data. Another example of time series data is that you have a month's data of a particular stock. Okay. So for example, you take this company Cipla, which is a pharmaceutical company. So you have, say in the month of July, you have July 1st, you have the data for Cipla, what is the stock price. Okay. You have July 2nd, what is the stock price. And similarly, you have July 31st, what is the stock price. Okay. Now we want to know on August 1st, what is going to be the stock price of this particular stock. So what you can do is you can feed this into a recurrent neural network like this, which is trained to predict this price. So when you have first fed the July 1st data, then you have fed the July 2nd data, and so on into this network. When you feed the July 31st, stock price, you will get the August 1st price. Similar technique can be used in NLP, where you will feed a set of sentences, where you for a sentence you will feed the words over here, and this final representation which you get is kind of a representation for this entire sentence. Now, with that representation, you can perform any classification on any task. But one of the disadvantage of this recurrent neural network is something called as vanishing gradients. So how is this recurrent neural network trained? Basically, you have a weight over here for the input, you have a weight for this output, you have a weight for the hidden state, right? You have weight matrices. Now, what happens is that if you have a very long sentence, okay, you have the first word here, and then you have the 100th word, and you have some 10th word. Now, the 10th word and the 100th word are related to each other. For example, the 10th word is Mangalore, and the 100th word is speaking something about Mangalore, so which you can make out when you read this sentence. But what happens in this recurrent neural network is, then the time step becomes 100, and you have hundreds of this. Basically, the same this thing when unrolled, you have 100 neurons, or the same neuron. This is just a representation. What happens is that by the time it comes to the 100th word, it has forgotten that the 10th word is Mangalore. So you see this kind of a loss of memory. Basically, this is a kind of a memory network, right? It is trying to remember what was the previous state, and based on seeing the input, is trying to predict an output state. Okay. So that was a problem with the recurrent neural. Another thing is vanishing gradients, because you will use these gradients for training, and after some times the gradients become zero because it is not able to remember any relationship between the words. Okay. So then they came up with something called as LSTM, or long short-term memory networks. Okay. So this is a much more complicated recurrent neural network. So here the idea is that, again, you have time sequence data. You pass it to a LSTM cell, you get an output. Okay. But what happens inside the LSTM cell is that there are 3 gates over here. So this is called as a forget gate. This particular set of operations is called as an input gate, and this is called as an output gate. So the idea here is that when you receive an input, how much of it should be remembered, okay, along with the past state, cell state, which is here, how much of it should be remembered? Is this useful to be remembered, or is the past state useful to be remembered? It is an abstract thing. Okay, it is. You cannot say it absolutely, like, okay, if I say 0.7% needs to be remembered, it means something. It is an abstract concept. So how much of it needs to be remembered, how much of the cell state needs to be remembered in combination with the input is your forget gate. Then you have this input gate, which takes into account the current input, and whatever has been the state which comes after this operation, what is the contribution of that to the current cell state. Okay. Then you have the output computation, which takes the input, which takes the current state, and then it gives an output. So this is very simply an LSTM, and this was able to overcome the problem of memory and vanishing gradients in RNN. Now, how LSTMs are used, I'll come up with the next example. Okay. So the next example where RNN and LSTMs were widely used is neural machine translation. Okay. This is an important NLP application. What is neural machine translation? It is a way to do machine translation with a single neural network. Okay. So the neural network architecture is called as sequence to sequence, and it generally involves 2 recurrent neural networks. So the idea is that you have a source language text, you pass it to a recurrent neural network called as an encoder, which does some encoding of this source language text, and then you pass it to another recurrent neural network called as decoder, which translates this text into a target language. For example, you have text in English and you want to get the French translation. All right. So you use this neural network over here, encoder and decoder. And together this is represented by T, which is the neural network to do the neural machine translation. Okay, I'll give another idea which will make it very clear. So here you have this encoder, right? Here you have the decoder. Now if you look at the encoder, you can consider it as there are 3 words over here. So I have 3 neurons over here. Okay, I am fine, and I want to translate it into French. This is obtained from Google. This is not my own translation, which is equivalent to Je vais bien. Okay, so you pass this input to this neurons of the encoder. It does some representation from this, which the decoder is able to decode this particular words. Okay, so you are basically training a neural network like this. Okay, so this cell could be an LSTM, could be an RNN. Mostly LSTMs are used. So these kind of neural networks where you have an encoder and a decoder are called as sequence to sequence networks, because you take an input as a sequence and you are trying to produce an output sequence. Now you can consider this in genetics as well. You can consider in various other domains as well. You can take a speech signal as an input as a sequence, and you want another speech signal as an output. Right? You can take a genetic sequence as an input, you want another genetic sequence as an output. So these networks are called as sequence to sequence networks. Now, how is neural machine translation done? So this neural machine translation sequence to sequence model is an example of something called as a conditional language model. The language, it is a language model because the decoder is predicting the next word of the target sentence Y. It is conditional because the next word prediction is based on the source sentence X. So the idea here is that the word J is actually conditioned on these words. It is conditioned on these words, I am fine. Now the word vais is actually conditioned on I am fine and this word, because of this recurrent neural network, right? It says it also sees this internal state. So this is why it is known as a conditioned language model. What does it try to predict? The neural machine translation, it tries to predict given a target sentence, which is your Y. You are given the input source sentence X. You are trying to predict the sentence Y in the target language. You can say it as, you can split it into conditional probabilities like this. Okay, so P of Y1 given X, P of Y2 given Y1 given X, P of Y3 given Y1 Y2 of X, and so on, right? So the probability of next target word given target words so far and the sentence X. So you are now trying to predict a model using this particular function. So this is how actually you train it. I'm not going into details of it, but the idea is that you know the input sentence, you know the output sentence. Okay, for example, this is a French to English translation. So you know the English sentence. To the output sentence, what you do is that you indicate a token which is start of the decoding. Similarly, sometimes you also predict an end token which says that I have decoded everything. So you pass this input, you get some outputs over here. Now you know that these are the words. You basically have a lot of pairs of French to English translations or vice versa, right? Which is your ground truth. So you know that if I pass this sentence, I have to get this output. For getting this output, the first thing should always predict in the decoder should predict this word. The second neuron should predict this word, right? So you get the predictions done first. Then you can look at the probability of this minus the target probability. Then you take the negative log of it, which is your loss function. So basically, when you sum up this negative log of all these each of these neurons, and then you try to minimize that. That is how you are going to train this network. So my assumption over here is that how you know to train a neural network. Okay, basically for training a neural network, what you do is in the output layer, you take the target, the probability for the target, and what is the predicted probability, you subtract it. If it is 0, it means it is correctly predicted. If it is not 0, means there is some error. So you take the negative log of that error and you sum it up over here, and then you try to minimize this. So that using gradient descent again. So that is how you train a neural, a translation model. Okay. So now comes the transformer. So this transformer is a complicated model. I will try to make it as simple as possible for you to understand, which has excellent results on translations, on machine translations. So the idea over here is that you have the input, again a French sentence. You want to translate it to English. You give it as input to a deep learning network called as transformer. Now, what is a transformer? Let us go into that. I'll just look at the time once, just to have a idea of where am I in terms of time. Okay, I'm fine. Okay. So the idea here is that, again, you can think of a transformer as having a set of encoder and a set of decoders, which are neural networks, to which you feed an English language sentence and you get a French, or vice versa. Here it is a French as an input and you get English as an output. Okay. Now, where did this concept of transformers come? Okay, so this is the original paper which was in December 2017. This is from researchers from Google Research. So they created a model called as transformer, and then they published a paper called Attention is All You Need. So this is a very fundamental paper in the deep learning space in NLP. The link is also there. Maybe I can share it later. You can read over this paper. So they created something called as a transformer. They proposed a transformer architecture of deep learning models, and this transformer actually outperformed the state of art results in machine language translation on benchmarking datasets. Okay, so this complex network is your transformer. Okay, so you have something called as an input encoding. You have encoders, and then you have decoders. Okay, you see various blocks over here. You have something called as an input encoding, a positional encoding, then you have multi-head attention, a feed-forward network, you have some residual networks. Okay, so let us go into step by step of what is this transformer. So my idea is that when I'm explaining the steps, by the end you will be able to understand this complex diagram. Okay, so in simplified form, you have a set of encoders. The encoder gives output to a set of decoders, and you get the translation. Okay. Now let us look at what is an encoder made of. An encoder is made up of two sublayers called as a self-attention layer, and another one is called as feed-forward layer. A decoder is made of a self-attention layer, and then there is an encoder-decoder attention layer, and then there is a feed-forward layer. We'll look into what each of these layers really mean. Okay. And I would advise you to look at, there's a person called Jay Alamnar, who has created very good visualizations for a lot of deep learning models. So this is the link for it. I can also share this PPT along with this link. You can look at his explanations. It's very simple language and it's very easy to understand. He does a lot of visualizations. A lot of visualizations are taken from this particular site. Okay. The idea is that this is the encoder, right? It is made of two sublayers, a self-attention and a feed-forward. So what is the input for the self-attention layer? It is a word, basically the word embedding. And the output of the self-attention layer is some vectors, which is given to a feed-forward neural network, which again gives you some output over here. So that is a simple idea of an encoder. Now, what does this self-attention network actually really do? Let us look into that. Okay. So basically, if you look at this, you get the word representations, and then it is kind of translated to the. You are again passing it to the next layer. Okay. So if you look at the network, you have many such encoders. So one thing which I forgot to mention is that in this architecture, they considered 6 layers of encoders and 6 layers of output decoders. So 6 layers like this was considered as input. 6 encoders were considered as for the encoding side, and 6 such things were considered for the decoding side. Okay. So for example, if you have 2 words, thinking and machines, you pass it to the self-attention layer and you get some outputs which are passed to a feed-forward layer, and you get some representation which is passed to the next encoder. Likewise to the 6 encoders. From the 6th encoder, you get an output which is passed to the decoder. Right. Now, what is self-attention? Okay. So if you have the word sentence like the animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired. Okay. So what does this word it refer to? If you ask a human, it is the animal, right? It is very easy for us to infer that. But for a language model to understand it, it is not so simple. Okay. So what does the self-attention model do? It tries to actually find out the relationships between the words in this sentence. What is the relationship between the and the animal? What is the relationship between the and all these words? right? Then it is able to learn that the it word is associated with the animal. So it is able to create some representation for these words with some particular task. So the task over here could be what is the co-reference resolution. So animal is the this thing and it refers to animal. So that is what is self-attention at a very high level. Now let us go to the low level. Okay, how is self-attention implemented? So you have this vector called as, you have this word called thinking and you have this word machines. Okay, so this is the embedding for thinking, this is the embedding for machines. So here they considered 512 vectors embedding. Okay, so they had 512 vectors embedding, and then they created 3 other vectors called as queries, keys, and values. Okay, and for queries there is this weight vector. For this keys there is this weight vector. For this values there is this weight vector. So these 3 vectors were created, and the sizes of this vector was actually 64. Okay, this was 512 bits. You can consider this is 64 bits. Okay, so now let us look at what are these query, key, and values. How are they computed? How are they used? Okay, so if you take these words thinking, for this thinking you have a query vector. Okay, what is done as a first step is that you also have a key vector for this thinking. So these are randomly initialized vector to start with. Okay, so and in the process of training they are learned. So what is done is that you do a dot product of q into q1, you get some score. Okay, so you can think it of multiplying the vector of this value with itself. Okay, then what you do is that then you take the query vector and multiply it to the key vector of all the other words in the sentence. For example, q1 into k2, you get a score. Okay, so if you have 2 words over here, you get 2 scores. If you have 8 words, what will happen? You will get 8 such scores. Okay, then you divide that by the dimension of the square root of this vector. So what is the dimension of this vector? It's 64. So you divide it by 8, you get a score. Right, you get many scores. Basically, if you have, you will get multiple values of q1 into k1 depending upon how many words are present. So if you have 5 words, then you will get 5 values. Right, what you do is that now you do a softmax operation on these values, you get this. Right, now what you do is that you multiply the softmax of this dot product into the value vectors. So you will get a set of value vectors. How many value vectors you will get? Depending upon how many words are present over here. Right, then what you do is that you sum up the value vectors, you get the output vector z1 over here. Okay, so this is the idea of attention. So basically, if you have 8 words over here, you will do this computation for each of these words and you will get z1, z2. This is how this q vector, the query vector, the key vector, and the value vector are used to compute the output. So what effectively this does is that in this softmax operation, if the words are not related to each other, the softmax values will go down. So the idea is in that in the value vector, you get if the relationship between words are close, then you get better values in the value vector. And when you do this summation, you get a representation of this word with respect to all the other words in the sentence. Okay, so that is your self-attention. How can you implement self-attention using matrices? This is the simple equation for that. So you have the input word vectors, you have the input embeddings, you have the weight vectors for this what you call query vectors, you have the weight vectors or weight matrix for the key vectors, you have the weight vectors for the value. So the first step is you do a matrix multiplication of q into k, basically this thing which computes the dot products, and then you divide it by the dimension, square root of the dimension of this query vector, and then you do a dot product with the value vector by applying softmax, so you will get z. One interesting thing over here is that if you look at, let me go to this self-attention. If you look over here, each of these Z1s can be computed in parallel. So that is the beauty of this network, right? Each of these can be computed in parallel because what is this doing? It is a value from these 3 words. What is this doing? It is a value from these 3 words, and these 3 words are given as an input at the same time. So there is a high amount of inherent parallelism present in a self-attention layer. So I think this is clear. Now what they did to make things better, they said that, okay, I don't want one attention head, let me use 8 attention heads. So basically 8 self-attention heads. From one attention head you will get one Z1. From the attention head to head 1 you will get one more Z1. Similarly, 8 Z1 vectors you will get for one word. Okay. Now the next question is that if you get 8 words like 8 Z1 vectors like this, how will you feed to the next layer which expects only one Z matrix, right? For that, what they do is that they have another weight vector which they'll concatenate all the outputs from each of these self-attention head for a single word and then multiply it by another weight matrix to get the final resulting Z matrix, which captures the information from all the attention heads, and this is now forwarded to the next layer. Now, why do you think you require 8 attention heads? Their idea was that each attention head captures some kind of abstract representation. So one attention head can capture what is the relationship between these words. One can capture what is the like kind of position between these words. What is the interposition relation between these words? So some abstract representations were captured, and when they experimented, they found that 8 parallel heads gave very good results. So they did it like that. Okay. Now, if I were to represent everything in one picture, it is like this. You have each word, you embed them into the word matrix. Then you have 8 attention heads. You calculate attention across these 8 heads. Then you multiply it with the weight matrix, and you get the attention. You get the vector output for these attention heads, which are fed to the next layer, and so on. Okay. So that is the idea over here. And then from that you fed to the decoder. Now, one more thing they did was that because we are only talking about word vectors, we didn't talk about the positional significance of these words. For example, this is the third word, this is the second word. So to bring the positional significance, they put something called as positional encoding. So another embedding matrix over here, another vector values were added to this input embedding to get a positional significance also. And this is how that positional significance was computed. So for the position I of the ith word, so basically this is how they computed some positioning matrix, which was some kind of a sine wave function of the position divided by something. So this is a formula, you can read more in the paper. So that is how they got the positional embedding vectors. Again, it is very arbitrary. They tried out something and they got these functions to be good. If you ask specifically why these functions, there is no answer to that. So then what they did was the next step, which is this thing is to make matters further complicated. They also created something called as residual connections. So if you look at this is a residual connection. So what is a residual connection? A residual connection in a neural network is nothing but a residual connection can connect from a previous layer to some future layer by skipping some intermediate layers. Okay. For example, this output Z2 is given to this add and normalize layer. It skips this feed forward this thing. So they found out that basically in this residual connections, they found out that sometimes this might forget some data. This residual connection will again make this layer remember this data. So that is the idea over here. So they created, they also created a add and normalization layer over here. And this is how one complex encoder layer was created. Okay. Now you have 6 such complex layers. So this is an animation which shows how this happens. So for example, you pass the input to embedding, you get the output from all the encoders, which is passed to the output layer, decoder layer basically, and then it predicts one word at the time step 1 for the output layer. At the time step, next time step, it will actually predict the entire sentence. Okay. Now, one interesting question which comes over here is that you had an attention layer over here also, right? So when all these words are passed in the first, say, 4th time instance, you got I, right? Now this I is again fed as an input to this decoder. Okay. But on the decoder side also, there was one self-attention network. Okay. Now in that self-attention network, what they did was for the future set of words over here, they kind of mask it. Because here the self-attention layer is able to work because you know all these inputs, right? So it is able to look at all these words together. But here it doesn't know what is the next word which is going to come. So they use something called as masking. Because of that masking, they were able to actually do self-attention on this output layer also. For example, when this word I is already predicted and it is fed as an input for this word am to be predicted, it does a self-attention on this word I. And then also does a there is also an attention layer for this encoder output. Okay. So this is what is the complex neural network called as transformer, which has very good results for machine translation. Okay. So the next question is, what is the last layer? What you got is representations, right? Basically, you will get some representation over here as output, right? You'll get an output representation like this over here. Now that is actually fed into another linear neural network along with the softmax layer to predict the words. Again, the softmax layer's number of cells will be vocab size. Okay. So this is how it is trained, right? For example, the output vocabulary is these words: A, am, I, thinks, student. So you create a one-hot vector like this. Now, when am is to be predicted, the index of am is 1. So the vector for this one-hot encoding for this vector am will look like this, right? The first position is, the 0th position is 0, all are 0, the first position is 1. Okay. How do you train the transformer? So you actually feed this as a target vector for that particular word when it needs to be generated. So you basically, in this step, let me go back. In this step, to train this neural network, you will pass that as a target vector over here. And then it will predict the thing as I. So if it is not predicted as I, then it will predict some other value. Then again, you do the loss function calculation and you feed it back and train it. So the idea is that after doing many such iterations of the training of the model, it is able to predict like this. Okay. So for the first neuron, it is able to predict that I comes, the probability value is close to 1 over here. For the second time step, it comes as am, then a student, right? And finally, you get this. So I am a student, it comes out as an output. Okay. So this is at a very high level. How do you train a transformer? So basically, after training, this is the expected target output. After training, you will get probabilities which are close to that expected output. Okay. So this was about transformers. To read more about transformers, this Google has this blog on transformer. And the beautiful part about transformers or LSTMs or RNN is that you need not sit and write code to implement that. Somebody has already done that job for you. So you have this library called Tensor2Tensor. Now this Python library has actually transformer models already done. So you can implement a transformer just 3-4 lines of code, because all of these are this thing. Only thing is that you require really powerful hardware, a server class GPU chip to actually run some of the transformers. You cannot run it on your normal GPUs or your normal CPU. Okay. So with this development of transformers, the next big development in this space came with this particular model called as BERT. Now, what does BERT stand for? Just excuse me for a moment. So BERT stands for something called as deep bidirectional transformers for language understanding. But BERT stands for bidirectional encoder representation from transformers. So it uses the transformers as base, and then it tries to get some representations from that. So only the encoder part is of use in BERT, not the decoder part. So the idea is you looked at word embeddings. That gave some good representation of words. Can we get a better representation of words? That is where BERT is used. Okay. So the idea is that you can do it in 2 steps. So the first is that it's a semi-supervised learning step. So you have lot of text present, right? Then you use BERT again in a skip-gram fashion or something to get embeddings. Once you get these embeddings, you give it to another neural network to perform any kind of task which you want to perform, which could be something like a classification in this example. So you have a set of spam and not spam mails. You give it to BERT, the input, it gives some representation for this sentence. Then you give it to a classifier, which classifies this as whether it is a spam or a not spam. Okay. So you have set of input, which is your words. You give it to a BERT, then you have a classifier, which does the classification. right? So now there are two kinds of BERT model. One is called as BERT base, one is called as BERT large. Okay, and they have a large number of encoder layers. So each encoder layer is called as a transformer block. You have 12 such layers over here in BERT base. And they also increase the feed forward networks and hidden units. So basically, in the previous case, 512 vectors, what you call the dimension of vectors was 512. Here you have 768 as a dimension, and you have 124 hidden units in the feed forward layers. Okay, and previously the attention heads were 8, right? Here they increased it to 12 and 16. So in the BERT base, you have 768 hidden units. In this, you have 1024. And your attention heads increased from 8 to 12 and 16. So you can imagine how much more complex is this particular network. And again, as I said, you require at least 11 GB graphics card to run one of these models. Not even train, it is just for running. If it is training, then you need a server class 32 GB or something kind of graphics cards. But people have come up with the smaller versions of these models, which are doing very well as well. Like there is a model called DistilBERT, which is a smaller version of this, and which does a very good job. Okay. So the idea over here is that how is BERT trained? So they use a concept called as masked models. Okay. So you have this particular sentence as input. So this word improvisation is removed. Okay, and you mask it. And then you are trying to predict this word improvisation. In the process, you are training this word to get very good representation for this particular word. So this is how, so it can be thought of like a context bag of words model. So this is how actually they trained BERT to get some good outputs. Okay. So the advantage of BERT compared to other models is it looks both in the forward as well as the backward this thing, because in the other embedding models, it was to only look at what are the words before. It was not able to look at what are the words afterwards. But because of this self-attention layer, it is able to look bidirectionally. That is why these are called as bidirectional encoding representations from transformers. Okay. So one of the things which they did was like they passed two sentences, and they also tried to classify as whether the second sentence follows the first sentence. So this is an application of BERT, right? And they also had kind of masking also over here. So this was one more task from BERT. So with this, this was about transformers and BERT. So again, I'll just for some interaction, again, I'll just ask a couple of questions over here. Okay. So can you just tell me what is the advantage of, I'll go to the chat. Again, in the text of this thing, can you actually tell me what are the advantage of self-attention? Like what you have understood by the term self-attention. If you can just type it, it should be good. What do you think is self-attention? And what is its advantage? Anybody can type, anybody can answer. Yes, it is association between birds. What does it allow you to do? Okay. So basically in self-attention, you can associate each words in the, it doesn't minimize computational complexity, but it is trying to actually look at, it is trying to create new representation of words by looking at both directions, right? For a sentence, if you consider as a sentence as a, what you call time series, okay? So basically the words which follow the first word or the second word in the future, you can consider as the words which are coming from the future, right? So you are able to look at that entire time sequence in one shot. And then you are trying to relate between these words. Okay, so that is where this self-attention is a very powerful concept. And self-attention is not just a concept for NLP; it is also a concept in, say, images. Okay, So attention as a concept is also useful in deep learning in images as well. So it has very other applications as well. So that is about this thing. So what do you think is a disadvantage of a transformer? What do you think is a disadvantage of a transformer network? Okay. So one of the disadvantage of transform network compared to other simple machine learning algorithms or LSTMs is that it's a very complex network to implement, and it is a very resource intensive model. Okay, because if a transformer consists of 6 encoders and 6 decoders, and every encoder consists of feed forward layer and an attention layer. Again, the attention layer is nothing but 8 attention heads. So you can think of how much parameters will get created in a particular model. The parameters will be in millions, right? So you have to learn so much of these things. So you require a lot of training data as well, and this thing. But the advantage is that people have trained it, say like Google has trained and released this model on a huge amount of data. So you don't need to train on your data, but you just need to fine tune on your data for a certain set of tasks. And it gives very good representations for those tasks. So those are the advantages. Okay. So yeah, you need a good server class infrastructure to run those transformers, but a lot of new research papers are coming on using transformers for various tasks. So one such example we look at now. Okay, so now I think I have 2 more sections. Let me try to complete as planned. Okay, so one of the applications of natural language processing is question answering. So basically, if I give a context like this, which has a lot of sentences, right, which is talking about something about rebuilding Poland. Basically, Warsaw is a city in Poland, and there is something about World War II and all those stuff. And then the question is, what was a major failure, especially in the building of Warsaw? So you can think of this as a machine comprehension. Basically, everybody would have done comprehension in some point of their life in schools. So basically, in English language, what they do, they give you an essay, and then they give you a set of questions, and you are supposed to read the essay, understand the what is the answer for the questions, and then answer. Now, the equivalent of that, if you are trying to program, is machine comprehension. So here the idea is that you are given a context, you are given a question, now find out what is the answer. So here, what was a major failure, especially in the building of Warsaw? So the answer over here is that a 3-year plan to rebuild Poland, right? Though it was basically, if you look at, worth mentioning, that was a major success, but what was expected to be a major success, but what was expected followed was the opposite. Okay, so that was the answer over here. Okay, now how do you do this using deep learning? So basically, you are given a corpus, you are given a lot of questions, and you may be given an answer also. Okay, which is a subset of the context. Now you have to develop a model such that next time when I'm asking a question related to these contexts, it is able to give me the answer. For that, they actually came up with a very complex network called as SDNet. Okay, and this was done on a data set called as SQUAD, which is Stanford University question answering data set. This data set has close to 100K question answer pairs. Okay, so I wouldn't go too much into detail over here, but I will just try to explain you what they did. So one side, they have a context. From the context, they wanted to get a context representation. Okay, from your query or the question, they wanted to get a representation again. Now, using these two representations, they will train a network to predict the answer span. Okay, so what they did over here was in the input side, what they gave the question, from the question, they created word embeddings, and they gave that word embedding. There is another word embedding called glow. So they created something like a word level attention over here. Then they gave it to context level attention networks over here, which is your multi-level attention. They also give a BERT model over here as an embedding for this particular layer. So this BERT model was different from the other BERT model, traditional BERT model, was because in the traditional BERT model, you get this final layer as representation. But here what they did was, they summed up the output of each transformer layer and created a representation for a word. So for example, here for the word Q1 in the questions, Q1, Q2, Q are the questions. For each questions, they created one representation like this by passing the question to BERT and not just taking the final output layer from the BERT, but all individual layers they took up and they summed up over here. Okay. And then they gave this as this thing, input over here. And this layer, they called it as question understanding, which they passed to a self-attention layer. Across these questions, it tries to create a question final representation. Similarly, across this context, it tries to create a representation and they are trying to get an answer. Now, an interesting question is over here would be, how did they come up with this architecture? So in deep learning, mostly what happens is that people try out different things and something works. Many times, there is no real, if you ask this original researcher also, why did you do this multi-level attention? Why did you do this self-attention? Why did you do it like this? They may not be able to tell you clearly why this happened. Okay, they tried out these things and it gave them good results. So now they are saying that, okay, this is a very good model for question answering. So most of the deep learning applications in NLP follow some kind of patterns like this. So they felt that if they do some kind of a self-attention over these questions, it will get a very good question representation. Some self-attention over context, you get a very good context representation, and then you are able to answer over here. So the idea over here is that how do you represent the context? How do you represent the questions? And then how can you use a neural network to train this model in such a way that given a question, you get a good answer. And they got very good results on this particular data set. Okay. So with this, I have covered question answering as well as transformers. Now we will go to a much more simpler problem. Even that problem has seen good results using deep learning. I also have two small demos or one demo which I can show you on this particular thing. So this is a very simpler concept. Those are all slightly difficult concepts, but this is a simple concept. What is a named entity? Named entity is a real world or an abstract object. It could be persons, locations, organizations, products that can be denoted with the proper name. For example, you have this example over here, right? This text. So here the entities are Facebook, American, Menlo Park, California. Person is Mark Zuckerberg. So Facebook is an organization. So given a set of text, how do you extract these entities? Based on these entities, you can perform further processes. So in the past, for the named entity recognition, it is a subtask of information extraction. It is used to find and classify named entities in unstructured text into categories such as person names, organizations, locations, medical codes. So in the past, to do this, you have rule-based systems where you write a certain set of rules, like, okay, I have a noun, and the noun is not surrounded by some words. Then I say that this is a organization. So that were rule-based systems. Then after some time, people started simple machine learning systems using hidden Markov models, SVMs, where they used to annotate text like this, pass it to a network. The network used to learn based on some, one hot vector or some other features or some post tag features. It used to identify that this is Google, this is September is the date, and so on. It used to identify named entities. But now the same thing can be done using deep learning neural networks, and it is giving very good performance. So the idea is that you get the word embeddings for each of this word and you pass it to a deep learning neural network. You also know the annotations beforehand, so you can train this neural network to identify such annotations in text. Okay. So to do this, you can use a library called spaCy. This is a very powerful natural language processing library. It is in Python and it is lightweight also, that it is run on your normal laptops and desktops. Doesn't require too much of hardware for it to run. So it is also designed for production use, and it also has, you can also pre-process text using this for deep learning, or you can perform some tasks like named entity recognition using deep learning. Okay. Now spaCy can perform a set of tasks like tokenization, part of speech tagging, dependency parsing, lemmatization, sentence boundary detection, a lot of things, text classification, a lot of things can be done using spaCy. How does spaCy do it? spaCy has a concept of a processing pipeline. So you have the text. In the processing pipeline, you have a set of tasks. One is tokenizer, tagger, parser, named entity recognition. And then finally, you get the output document with these things annotated. So they call this as a pipeline. And this entire thing is called as a model. Okay. And these are the named entities which can be detected in spaCy. Person, say location, right? Locations are again two types. One is buildings, other one is the geographical locations. Then you have events, then you have language. I will show you an example over here. Okay, let us go to some code. We have 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I will try to quickly cover what it is. Okay, so this is Python code over here. It is very simple. You import Spacie, you basically install Spacie, import Spacie, then you load a model over here like this. Let me zoom in a little bit so that it will be good for you. Okay. So basically, what it does is that you load a model over here, then you pass it to the NLP pipeline over here, which is this particular model. So this NLP pipeline performs named entity recognition, all those things, and gives you output like this. So when I pass this, Facebook is an American online, this particular text. Oh, it is now zooming in. Okay. Oh, sorry. It kind of, you can visually also display this thing. Just give me a second. I think I zoomed in too much. Zoomed out too much. Okay. Sorry for this. Okay. I'll open it again. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay, while it opens up, I'll give you another example of how I did some custom training on Spacie to detect a particular, disease entity. Okay. The browser is not responsive. Weird. Okay. Just give me a minute. I will restart Jupyter. I hope we can extend the session by at least 5-10 minutes to answer questions, as well as I'll try to show this demo.
Sir?
Hello?
Yes, sir. You want to extend the session? You can extend it for another 5-10 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Because I wanted to show these two demos basically. I'm not running it because it takes some time, but I just want to show that demos. Let me see if it works this time. Yes, it works. So basically, you load this library Spacie, and this is a Displacie is a visualization tools within Spacie. So you now load this library. You pass different models are there. I'm passing the small model. You also have the large model. You also have the medium model. English is the language, and it is annotated on some. The model was developed on some data, annotated web data. So this is the model. And then I pass this particular text over here, and then I'm printing the entities. By default, the pipeline has tagger, it has a part of speech tagger, it has a tokenizer, it has a named entity recognizer. So if you do the named entity recognition, it comes up like this, right? So Facebook is the text, it is saying organization, American is nationality, Menlo Park is location. Again, if you see Mark Zuckerberg is a person, and so on. Now let us visualize this using Displacie. So you pass the document to Displacie, you get this particular text. So you can see the visualized text, right? So it is able to identify the named entities. Now you also have the medium and large models. You can try out with different things. One thing which I wanted to show is that now this was plain English text, right? Now what if I pass medical text? So this is a medical text, right? There is a medicine name, Selagilin, induced postural hypotension in Parkinson disease. So when I pass this particular text to the standard Spacie NLP model for named entity recognition, it is not able to do anything because it was not trained for that. So now, if another example which I can give you is that what if I pass some text like this? Besides, Labor Ministry has launched a mission project. Here you have Pradhan Mantri Yojana and things like that. Okay, assuming you want to look at government documents and you want to extract some entities from policy documents. Even this fails really badly when I tried it. It was not able to identify words like Pradhan Mantri as a person. right? Pradhan Jan Arogya Yojana as a scheme. So you want to do custom named entity recognition at times, right? To perform your set of tasks. So I will explain you how you can do that very simply. So there is this medical data which has been annotated already. Okay. So that example which I gave, Selagelin induced postural hypertension. So this is actually annotated in a format called as BIO, where O stands for outside entity, B stands for begin entity, I stands for inside entity. So here postural hypertension is actually highlighted. So basically you are trying to find a disease entity. So you have text like this, where they have already annotated, wherever disease is present, they have annotated. For example, systolic orthostatic hypertension. So this is begin of the entity, this is inside entity, all the other words are outside entity. So you have this training data. Okay, the GitHub link is present. I've also created a YouTube video on this. You can go over there to look at the details of this particular data set as well as how I did it, but I'll quickly explain you over here. So the first thing which you need to do for training a SPACY NER is to actually convert this data into a particular format. So the original data looks like this, right? Set of lines like this. Every sentence is broken into words and there is a space which indicates that a new sentence is starting. Okay, so that you pass to you write a custom function to actually convert that data into something like this. Okay, where what is done is that it creates a JSON file where you have the sentence, and then you have the entities like this, where in the entities you say it starts at this particular token, ends at not token, this position in the string, it ends over here, and it is of the type B disease, which is beginning of disease entity. For example, this induced word. Then you have postural word, which is inside over here. Then you have hypotension over here. So like this, you converted your entire text file. So once you convert it into this particular format, you can now evaluate, do some kind of training of SPACY NER. But to evaluate the training, you have to define your own functions like precision and recall to see how well it has done. I will not talk about this, but I'll just show you how very simply you can do it. So to train a SPACY, what you do is that you load the existing model. Okay. In the existing model, you will disable all the other pipelines. For example, you will disable taggers and other things. You will enable only the NER to be trained, which is what you do over here. Now to that NER, you will randomly you will shuffle the input train data and you will pass it, and you will call a function called as update. Okay. There should be a function over here which says mini batch, and there is this pipeline update function. This function actually will update your existing model, and SPACY uses a convolution neural network model. So it updates the convolution neural network model to learn on the new annotations. But one thing is that it will forget the old annotation. So if you want to retain the old annotation, that also you should retain in your training data. Okay, so once such a model is trained, it takes some time to train. But if you look at over here in the first iterations, it doesn't learn anything. But slowly it starts learning. So if you go past the second, third iteration, by the third iteration, the recall score is 0.63, the F1 score is 0.57, and by some 20 iterations, you have already hit 90% accuracy in detecting the disease labels. So now let us look at how does it do. And again, if you plot the test score versus validation score, you can see that they are quite close to each other. That means this model is well learned. There is no underfitting, there is no overfitting. It is actually learning it nicely. Now, if you, after training this model, if you want to test it on new data, you save the model basically like this, and you load the model again. So basically you have a save function to save the model, which will save the model, and then you load it again, right? And you pass the text. So now after training, when I pass this particular text, okay, a text sentence, it gives me like this. So it is actually able to identify disease like ventricular tachycardia. These words also point to a particular disease. Then you have these diseases identified. So in this way, actually, you can train SPACY, which is a convolution neural network, to do your custom named entity recognition depending upon your task. Now, the task could be identifying information extraction in, say, legal domain. You have a lot of legal documents and you want to identify something over there. Or you have a lot of financial documents, you want to identify something over there. So there you can do custom named entity recognition using SPACY. So I've created a detailed 20-minute video explaining this code in my YouTube channel. So you can check it over there. So with this, I would like to stop our session. And if you are interested, you can check my YouTube channel where I'll put videos related to, these machine learning concepts and other concepts. If you have some questions, you can ask me now. I think the session was a little bit advanced in terms of the models covered, but I just wanted to give you an overall idea of these models and how these can be used in NLP. Okay, I am kind of open for any questions for another 5 minutes.
Participants, please post your queries in the chat box. I request the participants to post your queries in the chat box.
Any questions? I'm posting a set of links which could be useful for you to better understand these models. You can have a look at it. Okay, example of use of self-attention for image data set, somebody is asked over here. So the idea is that there is something called as a show and tell model. Okay, so basically you have an image, and for that image there is a caption which is given. For example, there is an image of a bird flying over some lake, right? So there is this sentence which is given, there is this image which is given of a bird which is flying over some lake, and you also have this sentence which says that a bird is flying over this lake. Now, given such kind of data sets where there is an image and a caption is present, given a new image, okay, you have to predict the caption. So this is something called as image captioning task. So there this attention is used. So what they do is that the sentence is actually split into set of words, and the image is also split into set of grids. Okay, then there is an attention performed over the image grid and the sentence to learn the representation which can map, say, the parts of the image to a caption. Okay, so that kind of models are there for image data sets. What do you call self-attention for image data set? Those kind of models are there. And then for text summarization data set, can you please share a link? Okay, for text summarization data set. I have not specifically seen any particular link, but there is one particular data, what do you call, database. I will give you that link. Give me a minute. This particular link has a lot of data sets for generic NLP tasks. So maybe there could be a text summarization data set present over there. I'm trying to search. I don't see anything there. But yeah, there is one data set over here for summarization. And there is a recent paper on that as well. So you can check this particular data set, particular link basically. Okay, there is a text summarization data set there. But you also have a lot of data sets over here for different NLP tasks. Okay, any other questions? So I know that this session may be a little bit, what do you call, the networks covered were a little bit high level and kind of advanced. But I hope you get an intuition for these networks. The details of that you can cover by looking at the links as well as reading those papers, because each of these networks can become a 2-hour session if I have to explain them in detail. These are advanced networks, and each of these networks will take time for you to learn, and you need to read the paper multiple times to understand it. But there has been a lot of research going on these concepts, and when I looked up recently, there were papers on using LSTMs and bidirectional LSTMs for transliteration from Kannada to English or English to Kannada. So there were a lot of recent papers on topics. There are a lot of recent works using these networks for translation in Indic languages, basically Indian languages. So if you go to Google Scholar, basically scholar.google.com, and search deep learning for NLP for Indian languages, you get a lot of recent papers and resources. So you can look at that. Okay. I think if there are no further questions, you can please provide me feedback maybe later. And then if required, I can conduct following sessions on these topics or some other topics. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for an insightful session on deep learning applications in NLP. It was indeed an honor for us to have you as a resource person today.